take a look back at 2011. What has 2011 meant for the Arab world in particular, considering the focus of the world has been on what has taken place in many parts of the Arab world, the Arab Spring, as we have come to know it. And what we have actually seen in the last year is a culmination of events that have gone back in history, many illegal and many tragic situations that have resulted from occupations. One of the major causes and that we see today is the degeneration of the situation in the Arab lands, in many parts of the Muslim world. And being in the 21st century, we are actually sitting with a situation where many of these countries remain occupied. Many of these countries have been torn apart. Conditions of people appallingly degraded in both economic and social terms. Today, close to 70% of the world's refugees are Muslim. And if we look at the background of events that have taken place in the last year or so, from Tunisia, Egypt, Libya, Syria very recently, and even countries like Bahrain, Yemen, and certainly when we look at these countries, the conditions, have they really changed? Because we've been talking about despots, about dictators who have ruled these lands for many, many years, over 30 years in certain instances. And if we look at the situation today, has it really changed for the better? Now, someone who has been talking extensively about the world, in fact, the global scenario politically, and more so with regards to the Middle East, he's made many, many predictions in the past, and we've spoken to him earlier this year as well with regards to what has been taking place in the Middle East. And this certainly is a culmination of many of the issues that my guest tonight has highlighted in the past. And he is none other than Daryl Bradford Smith. And Daryl being no stranger to the airways of Channel Islam International, always great to have Daryl with us. His insight, his expert analysis, and his reading into the situation on events and major events that take place in the world. So right now we're going across to France, and we're joined by none other than Daryl Bradford Smith. Daryl, good evening to you, sir. Welcome, and great to have you with us once again.
Well, it's great to be back with you, Anayat. Each time we do a broadcast together, we actually move the knowledge base ahead a bit, because of course as things develop here, we're getting a clearer picture of how difficult life will become for many, and how seriously degraded our world has become at the hands of the leadership that we've got in our countries. You'll note that most countries that are listening to this broadcast right now have elite rulers or people running their countries that do not voice the opinions of the public. And that's true with South Africa, it's true with Zimbabwe to the north, it's true in Egypt, it's true in Tunisia, it's true in Libya, it's true in Iraq, it's true in the United States, it's true in France. So the fact of the matter is the people running our nations and the people running our medias usually, and this is an exception, CII, don't represent the people. They represent the ruling class, and that ruling class has been, I would say, co-opted, but even groomed by a criminal cabal, if you will. And that criminal cabal has groomed these people to do their bidding globally, and that's exactly where we are right now. These plans that are taking shape in the Middle East as well as the world have been on the drawing board for decades and even over a century. And I can prove all of those things to the listeners given a couple of moments. But yeah, it is great to be back. It is Christmas time here in France, so many people are struggling at this Christmas period to have a holiday season. We're talking about unemployment skyrocketing. We're talking about inflation taking hold. We're talking downgrades of the French debt. The ECB is bankrupt. The banks of France have been downgraded. They're bankrupt. And the public is feeling the strain. But I'm not unique here in France. It's happening in America, in Britain, in Germany, in Spain, Italy, Greece, across the Arab world. It's happening globally, and it's by design. So we've got a lot to talk about tonight.
Absolutely. Now, Daryl, let's just go cast our mind back and let's go to 2011, earlier in the year. And, there was just so much excitement. There was a lot of euphoria that was being expressed mainly by the mainstream media. Many people got carried away. And I recall talking to you about it, and you said, wow, stop, don't get carried away. There's more to it that actually meets the eye. There is definitely another agenda. And, we've spoken in the past about some of your predictions on the economic front, the global meltdown that we spoke about in the past. And this time around, you were spot on again, Daryl.
Well, was I spot on about the meltdown? I mean, when I first did broadcast with CII some 3-4 years ago, I explained to the listening public that we were going to be in a global financial failure, and we are exactly where I said we would be. And I knew this was coming. And of course, if you go back to some of the architects of the Arab Spring, the people that are really behind the scenes pulling the levers of power, you'll note that a book was written by a man named Albert Pike back in the 1870s, 1880s. I forgot the date of Albert Pike's book, but he talked about the world would go through 3 world wars. And he talked about the First World War would be with Germany against the Allied powers. It talked about the British Empire. It talked about the rise of America. And then World War II would come within a 20-year period on the heels of World War I with similar actors. And in each instance, after these wars, they would redefine the map of the world. They talked about the rise of the Soviet Union and that how they would administrate that rise, how they would create a false opposition, how they would keep the Russian Soviet Union structured so that it would look like an enemy, but in fact was a main player in the world's power system. And then it talks about a third world war with Islam. And that world war with Islam would redefine the map so that we would have global governance. Because the largest block of non-supporters of the international banking structure that these people want to build and are building is the Islamic community. And without them on board, without Islam on board, too large a population will be outside of their control. So they needed their third world war to consolidate power, and it's shaping up to be exactly as Albert Pike described. The Third World War is about vilification of Islam. Many of the broadcasts here in France and in the United States and Britain are about finding the worst parts of the Islamic representation, such as Wahhabism and so forth, and putting that across the broadcast screens and the television sets of the West, and claiming that they all speak for all of the Islamic community. And you and I both know that that's just nonsense. But because most people in the West don't understand Islam, they assume that they're being told the truth about Islam, and thereby creating an enemy. And they've done a very good job of it. But in order to get this war ginned up and ready to go, they had to do some groundwork. They had to set up Israel. They had to implode the caliphate of the Ottoman Empire. They had to segregate tribal communities from each other, such as putting a border between Iran and Iraq right along the border between the same group of religious people. See, when the British started carving up the Middle East, they did it along lines that would ultimately cause problems in the future. They cut communities in half. The Kurds were cut in half. The Shiites were cut in half. The Sunnis were cut in half. And so that there would always be an easy flashpoint for the next phase of problems they wanted to create. And here now we are in this past year, they have lit the match of those problems and reignited many of the old problems and hatreds between groups, and they've fanned those fires through false flag terrorism and blamed it on the other. And now where we are right now is on the verge of a third world war. And this time, of course, if Syria gets involved and Iran gets involved, of course, we're looking at possibly China coming in, and then the Russians coming in, all by design, by the way. And then we're going to be in a mess that we don't even want to talk about. I mean, it will just be beyond the pale, if you will, or beyond anybody's imaginings, because these fools in charge are not averse to using nuclear weapons. They've already used them in places like Fallujah and didn't care one lick whether they were polluting the place with depleted uranium or polluting the place with nuclear weapons, like I said, in Fallujah and so forth. So they will do that. Look what they did, Inayat, and you can comment on this in a second. They took a country like Libya. Of course, Gaddafi played both sides of the fence. We can talk about that in a couple of minutes if you like. But his country was without debt. It had a gold-backed currency in their vaults. It had a water system. It had health care. It had roadway systems that were all intact. It had all of the things that a modern nation would hope to have. And today, all of those things are completely and utterly destroyed. And we're claiming in the West that we saved the Libyans from a terrible disaster. So, but see, this is how much of a control they have over the media. But we can go anywhere you want with any of the things I just said, Inayat.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. In fact, there's just so much you've said already, Daryl, and I've been frantically taking some notes because I think there are some very, very interesting angles that we will be taking for this evening's discussion. But before that, it's time for me to pay some bills. We'll be back with you in a minute.
Global Dynamics on CII.
It's 8:25 p.m. Central African time. We continue our discussion with my guest tonight, Daryl Bradford Smith, and we're looking back at 2011. We're looking at the Arab Spring and related issues. Daryl, just to continue, and you made a point where you spoke about the next phase of problems. Now, since the beginning of 2011, we witnessed the fight, against ruling regimes that are subservient to foreign powers, and unfortunately, what we find that in many, many instances, many lives were actually lost, and in a hope, to enjoy some sort of democracy. But I read a very, very interesting comment, and this comment talks about a poisonous snake in the background, which has been covertly directing and orchestrating the Arab Spring that we speak about. Mm-hmm. And when we talk about the next phase of problems, we're already starting to see Egypt is a clear-cut example, where even as early as today, we witnessed that with Mubarak gone, and we know what the dictator Mubarak was, an autocrat, he was a despot, ruled for many, many years with an iron fist. Yet, even until today, we witness clashes that are taking place in Egypt. We find that people are being killed, and nothing seems to have changed.
Well, the fact of the matter is that the ruling elites of Egypt are exactly the same as when Mubarak was there. The military-industrial complex that Egypt has developed by accepting billions and billions in aid from the United States has developed into a police state, and that police state's lock on the populace has not changed. Neither has much changed in Tunisia, where yesterday you'll note that the new leader of Tunisia is calling on all Jews to return to Tunisia. And if you don't know this, before the Jewish invasions of Palestine back in 48, there were 100,000 Jews living in Tunisia. That right now there's about 1,800, but they're all going to be invited to come back. Jews are starting to run the country of Libya right now. So this was all by design, and by proxy, the same ruling elites are taking their orders from Herzliya in Israel, in Cairo. But you have to note that when the United States started exporting at the beginning of 2009, started exporting inflation to the third world by the overprinting of dollars, which is exactly what they did when they flooded the world's market with dollars. They created commodity inflation, which really hit the poorest Arab nations the hardest, and Egypt was one of the first. So they created all of the conditions that were rife for lighting a match to an explosive event, and that explosive event turned out to be what these criminals in the West called Arab Spring. Well, there really was only in the beginning only a demand for better prices for cooking oils and a better price for their staples and their food, and of course it turned into some political demands, and then they made superficial changes that were absolutely non-existent if you take a look at who's in charge today. And many people, as a result of their activities, have been identified by this ruling elite and the military. They know where these people live, and in the darkness of night, their people are driving up to their homes and kidnapping and killing these people, or they're killing them directly right in Tahrir Square. And they're putting the lock back down on their control, but this time they're doing it by the vilification of Islam at the same time. You have to understand how these battles play out in the Western press, because as I told you, a third world war is being planned with Christendom, Europe and America against Islam. And in order to get that war ginned up, they have to vilify the people of Islam. And these events taking place in this so-called Arab Spring are ideal for them to pick and choose events to say how barbaric or how sick or how dangerous Islam is, and to gin up anger against the Islamic community in all the resident countries where these people live, like Britain and France and so forth. And what we're seeing now is a readying for the next phase of their crime toward world government.
Mm-hmm. And just as far as the next phase also is concerned, we shouldn't be shying away from the fact that both people like Mubarak bin Ali, these people were extremely wealthy. And Daryl, I'd like your comment on this, because there was an interesting article that appeared in one of the Egyptian weekly papers talking about Hosni Mubarak and talking of $700 billion of Mubarak's funds that were actually in banks in France, in Germany as well, and said that this money obviously, in fact, even in an Israeli bank, and according to one of the branch managers of the Israeli bank, she says she was actually authorized by the Israeli government to transfer some of these billions that Mubarak had, even to people like King Abdullah, even the UAE President Khalifa bin Zayed, and also, in fact, it also talks about people like Barack Obama and also Benjamin Netanyahu. Are you surprised, that a comment like this would actually come out, and considering, that this was a billionaire, he had a lot of money, and just how his money is actually being moved?
Well,
Possibly, Daryl, just to add to this, possibly this could be one of the reasons why Hosni Mubarak was actually sacrificed, because they knew he had all those billions, and they knew what they were going to do with all this money.
Well, that was one of the subplots here. I certainly know that they did this very same thing with the gold supply and the money that was in foreign hedge funds out of Libya as well, and took the monies out of these hedge funds and put them into their own bank accounts, not the elites. Some of the central bankers have taken that. The Federal Reserve are the real criminals here, and when you find out the major owners of the Federal Reserve are the criminal Jewish bankers, sadly, the Zionist bankers, they're confiscating the wealth of these North African countries in order to prop up their plans. Mubarak they could have sent him $50 trillion. It wouldn't have mattered, because all they needed was a military to take it back. It does, they propped him up as an individual for a very long time. I'm going to give you a good example. Sharif Gaddafi was a friend of Nate Rothschild, and he had dinners in Corfu with this guy Mendelssohn, who is the Rothschild's right-hand man in London, and this guy was a mover and shaker with all the crooks. and then he leads the revolution against them? Come on, I'm not that stupid. This stuff, the fact that he was playing both sides of the fence with Israel, with Iran, with the Lockerbie stuff. Come on, he had all the information that the Lockerbie bombing was done by Israeli agents. He never brought that information out. There were backdoor dealings. There still are backdoor dealings between Iran and Israel. Spare parts for their F-14s. We look back onto Iran-Contra when Reagan was doing backdoor deals with Iran. You've got to be kidding me. These elites that run these countries are marching their populations to perdition, right down to enslavement. And the very same thing has happened in many other ways. The fact that your ex-president actually told the truth about AIDS being a fraud. Hey, they got him right out of office for doing that. They've been killing populations across the world with this fraudulent AIDS virus, and then anybody who speaks up about it is summarily dismissed or murdered. You have to understand that either you play by their rules or you die. And everyone thinks that Putin is a good guy, he's going to fight back against these people, blah, blah, blah. That's a bunch of nonsense. This guy has been in the pocket of the Zionist criminals from day one. The assets that were transferred out of the oligarchs' hands, the Jewish oligarchs that stole everything from the Soviet Union, have ended back up in Rothschild's hands, another Zionist. So, this stuff, I don't make this up. I just do the research. And anybody who looks beyond what they're learning on television or what they're learning in superficial reports doesn't get these full stories. And they go on to believe parts of the story and only parts of it, and they don't get the full picture. It's taken me a great deal of time and effort to understand the machinations of this group, but I do understand them, and it's very difficult for them to throw me a lie now and have me buy it. I've done too much research. There's too much information available today, Anayat, for people to have the excuse that they didn't know the truth. IamTheWitness.com has over 45 books on it, and if you want to read about the crimes of this group over the last several centuries, you're able to do that online today. And as you learn more and more about how they've done things in the past, you become far more aware of how they plan things now in the present and what they're planning in the future.
Absolutely. Now, Daryl, if one just follows the sequence and the chain of events in the last year, and as you correctly pointed out, this was a plan in the making for a very, very long time.
Yes.
People like Ben Ali, people like Mubarak, they could actually afford to let these people go.
Yes.
They could sacrifice Ben Ali and Mubarak. Gaddafi was treated differently, a different kettle of fish altogether, because Gaddafi wouldn't bow to their dictate. So Gaddafi needed to be taken out, as was the case with Saddam Hussein. Yemen, we know, is very, very strategically placed for the United States and for its interests. Let's just focus a bit on Syria, because Syria obviously is burning. And do you think Syria is going to go the same route as Libya?
Well, ultimately, it will. Nothing will be identical to any other event. However, the so-called Al-Qaeda fighters that they used in Kosovo, the same people they're mercenaries, the same people they paid to fight against America in under the so-called Al-Qaeda / Northern Alliance group that was fighting in Afghanistan. These people are all paid by the West as false opposition. And they were the same people. We knew that in the 1980s that Saddam Hussein and Al-Qaeda were enemies. He didn't have Al-Qaeda operatives in his country, and he kept them out. But as soon as they got rid of him off the airwaves, they started saying he had ties to Al-Qaeda, which he didn't. It was just for public consumption in the West. What they've been able to do with these events, because most Westerners are more worried about Dancing with the Stars than they are of what's going on in their world. And as a result of that, they use these events in Islam and in these Islamic countries as further ways of vilifying the Islamic religion and Arab and Persian peoples around the world, and including Pakistanis and so forth. And you have to look at this in a larger context. They have an agenda that goes well beyond Islam, and it goes into controlling both Russian and African, South American, and all of the resources of the world under a single currency, under a single government, and under a single financial structure that will enslave us all. And there are reasons how and why they're doing this. We can talk about that. There's a great book written by a man named Edward Mendel House, a Jewish guy from the last century. In fact, he died in 1920-something. In 1912, he wrote a book called Philip Drew, Administrator. Now, what he did was he made it very clear in that book that everybody would become chattel slaves. Now, you'll note in South Africa 30, 40 years ago, birth certificates among the population were rare. If you were born in a hospital and you were from the white community, you would certainly have a birth certificate. That certificate, it gives over ownership of your life to a bank, and they trade your birth certificate on a bourse. Dun & Bradstreet has a number for you, and you become what's called chattel slavery. You're held in trust against future debts of your nation. Now they've expanded this to go globally, and this system, Americans have been enslaved since the 1930s. South Africa, it's been since the late 1950s, early 1960s. But it's going worldwide, and what we are is assets in the larger scheme. And if you understand this, Edward Mendel House wrote the whole story about it. And we are chattel. And if you learn about what that means, you'll understand that the ultimate goal is to have a financial system where the human beings on this planet, men and women themselves, are the currency by which these people trade, and power and ownership over natural resources are their power base. But they're doing it with mass starvations, which they've used in the past. You can look back at the Russians losing 38 million, or the Chinese losing 70 million, or, communism alone has killed over 140 million directly in its less than 100-year history. So you have to understand that these people are mass-murdering psychopaths who have absolutely no regard for what they do to you, and their plans for you are an enslavement. And it's quite clear because the writers that put together the plan have been exposed. Their writings are shown clearly, and their plans are shown clearly. And they've been following the plan to a T. They haven't varied even a little bit from Mendel House's Philip Drew plans or from Albert Pike's plans. And if you understand history, you'll understand that we are marching toward this Third World War. There are a few things that have messed them up. And I will open up the idea that the Internet has really done damage to them. They did not expect the Internet to have the force it has had. And there are many millions of people that have been awakened to the crimes they've committed. Whether or not we will get traction enough in our truth to stop them from their plans is another story altogether. Religious people will believe, and you may be one of them, and many of the listeners may be them, that we will ultimately win because good will triumph over evil. I am more of the mind that the religious side of things are the empowering of us in the truth. That as part of my religious awakening toward defeating these criminals is that I try to awaken others and take opportunities that the divine has given me to defeat them. And this is kind of my take on it, which basically means that we do have an opportunity to beat them, but we have to understand how they work. And it's not... most people listening to this broadcast have been scratching their head probably wondering, what is this guy talking about? Or if they're not doing that and they do know about some of my work, they're starting to say, holy smokes, he's right, and he has been right. And I am right about this, and
Absolutely. Well, Daryl, we need to go back to the marketplace. It is 18 minutes to 9 p.m. Central African Time. I'd like to remind our listeners that we are opening up the lines right now, 011-494-7007. Daryl is going to be with us until 9:30. Thereafter, we have got just one or two events that we need to promote, and we need to talk to one or two people as well. So that is going to take place from 9:30 until 10. But Daryl will be with us until 9:30, so feel free to call 011-494-7007.
Global Dynamics on CII.
It's just gone 8:46 p.m. Central African Time. Global Dynamics with myself, WWIII, Daryl Bradford Smith, joining us from France. And we are talking 2011, some of the major developments that have taken place, such as the Arab Spring. Daryl, just to continue, and let us just spend a few minutes talking about Israel and how Israel has benefited from the Arab Spring.
Well, first of all, you can't speak about Israel in isolation because, truthfully, most of the people that benefit from the Israeli activities are in London, London Square Mile and the bankers, New York, Chicago, places around the globe where criminality is rife. But they use the Israeli state as a home base for criminality globally, whether that be organ harvesting and stealing from poverty-stricken people, or even murdering people for their organs, or drug dealing, or weapons trading, or the different things that the Jews are famous for: cocaine trafficking out of South America, ecstasy manufacturing out of Israel, and then the murder for hire that goes on out of Herzliya. So you take a look at Israel, and it's just basically a crime-ridden, filth hole is what it is. And the Jews that live there are as brainwashed as any humans have ever been in human history. These people believe themselves to be divinely given Israel by God himself, when in fact, as you know, these people, 95% of them are from Khazaria and have no connection to the Holy Land at all. They're not Semitic people. So essentially this was a construct by Rothschild, and he did it through his the people such as Cecil Rhodes helped him, Oppenheimer helped him, and then of course he set up a house with his Freemasonry out of the Salonika, Greece Lodge, and sent in Jews, the Young Turks, and Ataturk was of course from a Jewish family, destroyed the Caliphate, set up the Middle East for the acceptance of the Israelis, and then got the Nazi Germans in the 30s to bring shiploads of Israelis, of German Jews and Polish Jews by the boatload into Palestine. And lo and behold, they set themselves up there and became terrorists and murdered their way to control. And now they are a vicious, vile state of vipers. And they utilize the power structure they have in other countries, such as the United States, to extend the power that they've had for some time. Once Syria goes, you'll have to understand that this is a lot has to do with petropower, petrodollars, oil. The Straits of Hormuz will ultimately be closed in some war that takes place between either Pakistan and America or Iran and America. The oil won't flow out of that region, and they've had plans on the drawing board of a huge pipeline that will traverse Iraq, go across Syria, and go right out to Haifa Harbor. And all the world's oil will go through the hands of the Israelis. Now, that's part of the long-term plans. Now, when you understand the importance of oil to the world economy, when you turn over about 70% of its control to Israeli pipeline controllers, and of course, the companies pumping it out of the ground, by and large, are Jewish-owned anyway, you'll understand that they're handing over the region and the power base to the Israelis over time. So this is really where we're heading right now. But they've controlled Egypt for the last 25 years. They've controlled Tunisia through their control of the despot that ran that place. They've controlled Gaddafi was a player with them, along with his son, doing deals with Mendelssohn and doing deals with Nate Rothschild. So Gaddafi has been a dual player for a long time. You note that Saddam Hussein was involved with these people, and in fact, the only thing he did wrong was he was part of the plan to get rid of him. I mean, they planned to get rid of Saddam Hussein 30 years ago when they put him in power. They groomed that guy with Nasser, and you know, when they had the fake duality or bipolar Egypt, when the supposed Soviets were backing Nasser and the rest of it, and that's all a bunch of nonsense. We've got the fabrication of this Muslim Brotherhood that was actually founded in London by the London bankers. And now we're getting power turned over to them at some level, which they're part of the same crime network, not necessarily at the grassroots, but certainly at the leadership level. And so when you take a look at this, they're progressing as planned. You know, 2011 was certainly an active year, but wait till you see what's coming in the next 2 or 3 years. Then you're really going to get worried. So, you know, this is just a setup. This is a setup for what's coming.
Absolutely. Now, talking about setup for what's coming, and we don't still know with certainty as to what is coming in Afghanistan and Iraq. We've heard since, in fact, 2011, various U.S. officials making statements about drawdowns of U.S. forces in Afghanistan and Iraq. And these wars have now lasted even longer than World War II. And, you know, in fact, many are starting to wonder now, what is America actually trying to do, or why are these U.S. officials actually making these statements? Because we all know that they in Afghanistan and Iraq for a very, very long time.
Well, you know, the idea of destroying a nation's population base and causing them to go hat in hand to the criminal government that they put in place has a long history. The British used it to great success in South Africa. After they incarcerated the Boers, which were the white farmers that had gone down there, the Dutch/British farmers that set up shop in your country, because they discovered there was all kinds of mineral wealth under the ground of these farmers, and they had to get rid of them. So they set the country up to go through a horrible war period at the demand of Rothschild and Cecil Rhodes and their round table, which is nothing more than the CFR of Britain, and so once they got the population in a starvation mode, they told the black community in that country that if you want food, you're going to have to go and work in our mines. So the black community said, okay, well, we need food. We're here. We might as well go down. And they started digging the ground. And they built one of the greatest thefts of natural wealth in human history out of South Africa. And you're still living with the results of it. But you're starting to see the playing out of your mineral base. They've taken most of the real valuable minerals out of the ground. Afghanistan has over $3 trillion U.S. dollars in value of minerals. And not only that, it's on the crossroads of two major continents, both the subcontinent of India and the Uzbekistan and Kazakhstan, and all of these places where petrodollars are still flowing quite freely. And so it's a real crossroads point. Now, they're willing to spill a lot of American blood to secure that crossroads, those minerals. Conoco, of course, was the origin point of Mr. Karzai. He worked for one of the big oil companies over there, and, you know, he's nothing but a puppet, no different than any other puppet in the Islamic world. And so what we're going to see here is a continuation. Now, the Russians have had many opportunities to undermine the Americans' activities in Afghanistan. They haven't done it because they are on board with this. What you need to understand is that when Yeltsin gave up power, he gave it up to a KGB man. And the KGB has always been controlled by the Zionists. since day one, and they've never given up control of that. Even when it became the FSB, it's still controlled by Zionists. So Putin is just a puppet, just like the rest of them. And of course, they're going to use him as a foil. We need to keep pumping money into our military because that dangerous Mr. Putin, and we got to pump money into China, against China because China. What you don't know is all the advisors of Mao Zedong were Jewish. There's a book out in the world called The Jews of China. Go and take it out of your local library if it exists there and read it. It's all there for you. So all this stuff is window dressing in the news cycle to get people to believe the lie. If you go beyond it and do research, what you understand is that we're just in a major chess game right now of realigning the world's ownership and taking whatever sovereignty there is left in this world and transferring it to the hands of these criminals, including the financial, economic, as well as resource control into the hands of this criminal elite. And we will be chattel slaves from now until eternity. And I'll tell you why that's a real possibility. Technology is giving them a force multiplier effect that they didn't have before. The use of these drones, the use of computer surveillance, the use of tracking, the use of satellites. These people's effect on our individual lives is being expanded. So let's say there's 6 or 8 million of them working for this crime gang globally. Now that they can have a much more important effect on your individual life than they used to have because they can leverage the use of these technologies to go after people they need to go after. And they've done a very efficient job of doing that with their political enemies.
Absolutely, Daryl. In fact, we're going straight to the lines. We're going to Nabiti. We've got Brother Abu Bakr online. Abu Bakr, assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullah, Brother Inayat, and good evening to you, Daryl.
Abu Bakr, it's nice to hear you.
Yes, yeah. Okay, I'd like to your thoughts on the stock market, like the Dow Jones. It's kind of still at quite a high level. How is it being propped up? And maybe you can just enlighten us. A couple of years ago you had your friend Daryl on some trends analysis. What he's late thoughts there. And like the high oil price, you think a lot of money from the Middle East is flowing into the U.S. or what's the flow of funds there? And you think they're going to be sucked dry and then sort of things will implode?
Well, the stock market is basically one trading house trading to another trading house and then back again. What we've got is what they call high-frequency trading, HFT, high-frequency trading, where the volumes that are being demonstrated in these stock markets are really not coming from any individual traders or any individual investors like myself. I spent a great deal of my earlier life involved in stock market, and this is back when it was actually an honest or somewhat honest event. Today it is no longer honest. Most of these companies that you're watching stay afloat will implode. Many of them will anyway. They're shaking out the numbers of different companies that there are. You will see failures in some of the car companies of the world. You'll see failures in many of the banks. You'll see failures in many of the manufacturers, but their selected companies to survive have already been earmarked, and they will be the last man standing, and places like Walmart will be in charge of the retail, and car companies like Ford and possibly Renault, because that is a big Rothschild holding, will be the car companies that you see left standing, and as you look around the landscape, you'll note that the stock market will ultimately descend by probably 30 to 40%, but we're talking about money printing that has gone on for the last decade that has eclipsed any money printing in human history. These guys have actually printed 26 trillion with a T dollars and flooded the world with them. So, and they've propped up European banks with it. They've gone out and manipulated central banks of countries that are their enemy. They've bought large holdings of physical gold with it at rock bottom prices, because the real price of gold should be someplace close to $10,000 an ounce today. and instead it's been artificially held down. Well, you know, you're going to watch things that make your eyebrows go up and down in convulsive fashion in the next few years. Financial malaise and financial implosion is going to be the order of the day, and the stock market is the least of our issues, really.
Okay, now thanks for your thought.
Yes, shukran for the call, Brother Abu Bakr. Assalamu alaikum. Daryl, I've got a number of comments that have come through on Facebook and a number of text messages that have come through. Just very quickly, Daryl, the high oil price that Abu Bakr spoke about.
Yep. Well, the oil price is being... Let's look at what oil can do for these people. If they keep the oil price high, it continues to bleed off any possibility of a recovery in our economies. They don't want recovery. They want desperation. And they're building desperation with high oil prices. Now, let's talk about why they would do that. These people pump oil out of the ground. Let's say they take out 30 million barrels a day. If they get $20 for those barrels of oil, they don't make much profit. Let's say that because of world demand is dropping because of the depression that's going on, we're living in a depression, let's say they're only taking 20 million barrels a day out. What if they add the price of oil up to $94 and now they're actually making money as oil demand drops? These people are cleaning up right now on oil. The demand is dropping and their price is rising.
Just doesn't make sense. You're right. In fact, Jose goes against any principle of economics.
That's right.
You know, that is a very, very, very basic lesson that many of us that have studied economics have learned, Daryl, and what you're saying is very, very true.
Yep.
But right now, Daryl, we need to go for the break. We need to go for the Isha Adhan. It is 2 minutes past 9 p.m. Central African time. Remember, Daryl's going to be with us until 9:30. We come back. We will still continue taking your calls. A number of comments that have come through on Facebook, we will address those, and also some of your text messages that have come through. We surely will deal with them when we get back. It is 9 minutes past 9 p.m. Central African time. Daryl's going to be with us until around 9:30, 9:35, maybe 9:40 if we can push Daryl. But Daryl, I just want to go through some of the comments that have come through on Facebook. And this one comes from Abu Khalid, who says, what is Daryl's take on the Wall Street protest, planned or coincidence?
Well, they're using it as an opportunity to categorize and take names of the participants. There is going to be martial law in the United States within 18 months, my maximum time frame, and they need to know who the involved threats are to them. And this movement across the United States is giving the criminal leaders an opportunity to find out who exactly runs the risk of upstaging them in the United States. There's really, here's the truth. There are a lot of people from my side of the research track that tried to get this information that I've put out for some time into that movement, and there were Jews at the very top of the Occupy Wall Street movement that savaged them and would not allow any of this information to show itself in any of these protests.
Yes, thanks for that, Daryl. And then the next one says, with regards to Russia, will Russia sit back and watch? It's a very strong ally of Syria. So, wait a minute, let me just get this right, Daryl. It says, will Russia sit back and watch? It's a very strong ally of Syria, and why is it called the Arab Spring or Syria's fall? to the so-called Arabs, which just doesn't make sense what is written. But I think the key issue here is, will Russia sit back and watch?
Well, if it's told to, it will, but I don't know how much participation they've got planned for Russia in that Syrian situation. But I do know that we are being set up for World War III, where Russia is on the other side of the West. It's against the West in some ways. And, it's not beyond these megalomaniac psychopaths to use, to use a nuclear device or devices in a war scenario where many, many hundreds of millions of people perish. They have always had as part of their plan, and you'll find that AIDS is one of these parts of it, is to limit or eliminate a large swath or section of the population. They believe we need to pare down our populations by as much as 80 to 90% in the world, and that many of us are considered, in their terms, useless eaters. And so there has always been a eugenics program going on, and it's not beyond them to use that scenario as a way of getting rid of us through a nuclear war.
Thanks for that, Daryl. We're going to the lines. Johannesburg we go. We've got Aisha. Aisha, assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam. How are you, brother?
Alhamdulillah, giving Sister Aisha.
Alhamdulillah, and to Daryl as well.
Hi, Aisha.
Fine, and you? I'd like to just point out a thing, from the way I've noticed things that are happening, that Mubarak was the ally, then Gaddafi became the ally now lately in the end, then Saddam Hussein was the ally of the West, and then they set up all these people, and then they made war against them.
Yep.
Now another thing they've done now lately is the division between Sunni and Shia. And there's in Bahrain where the war is happening between the Sunni and the Shia. Where in Syria there's a war between the Sunni and the Shia. So they are keeping the Muslim countries so busy fighting amongst each other that when they will attack Iran, then nobody's going to, we don't know what is going to happen that time, but they're going to be fighting among themselves first, so they're not going to realize what is happening, that the whole agenda is that they're going to finish, they're going to try to finish the Muslims up. But Israel has forgotten something. He is not a spider. He cannot have his fingers in every country around him. He is surrounded by these people. And something's going to go really ugly here. I'd like to hear that also.
Well, it certainly is, Aisha. Something is going to go desperately wrong here, but not in their view. It's by planning here. They planned this. The Sunni and Shia fighting has been orchestrated. The idea that Wahhabism is even part of Islam is a cruel joke on the world. It's been proven through research that the Saud family is from a tribal group of Jews that were so-called converted. But we've experienced in conversation, Inayat, what crypto-Judaism's about, and we know about what happened in the Caliphate in Salonika, moving into the Young Turks. We know that crypto-Judaism, through Sabbatai Sevi, was a very powerful tool of these criminals. They've been using that tool in the United States for years. John Kerry, claiming to be Irish with his name, but his family's Khan, the same family Dominique Strauss-Kahn comes from. So you have to understand that these people are masters of the chameleons of crime, and setting up Wahhabism as a radicalization of what Islam represents was just a way of vilifying Islam in the eyes of the West, so that when severe actions or measures are taken against Islam, and many millions of people are either starved or injured or murdered, people around the Western world will feel like they've won something, not lost. And this is because they believe that Islam is Wahhabism, because that's what's been promoted. And, of course, all the worst parts of what the Islamic community could ever represent is what's shown in the West. And if you know anything about the tenets of Islam, you know that it's a religion of peace. But it's also a religion of education. And those other religions don't want educated. The Al-Qaeda's mercenaries are from the Islamic world, but they do not, that the form of Islam that they practice does not want to be educated. They want to be ignorant and vicious. And this is by design. And you have to understand that some of the madrasas that have been set up by the money from Saudi Arabia through the CIA and the MI6 have created a sick type of religion. Now, there are sick types of religion in the Christian world that have been formulated by criminals. This guy, John Hagee, in the United States, does nothing more than promote hatred. And his whole game plan is about segregation and hatred toward blacks and hatred toward other races. And this is not what Christ taught. This is not Christianity. This is not what the Bible teaches or what anything that comes from the tenets of that document. So my point I'm trying to make here is that these people are manipulators of religion. Take a look at how they have bought and paid for the Catholic Church in Rome, and this vile creature that's calling himself the Pope is out there silent in the face of crimes being committed by Zion and saying that we are Judeo-Christians. We're not Judeo-Christians. We are, the Christian community is the antithesis of Judaism.
Yes, and staying with Saudi Arabia, in fact, I've got a question here. Why has Saudi Arabia not been the target of the Arab Spring?
It will be. When they find one of the last countries to be brought down, and that pipeline idea that I gave you earlier with all the oil flowing through through Haifa, that will ultimately be the goal, and it may happen in the next 18 months, it may happen in the next 2 or 3 years, but they will ultimately be discharged or moved out of their realm. I mean, come on. If the Israelis wanted to take Riyadh over, they could do it in about 3 hours. I mean, the military force that these people have, they don't even know how to use anymore. There's just no resistance that would happen in Saudi Arabia, none. They've been kept in power because they're right now they're needed by the West to get the rest of their plans underway. But as soon as they're not needed anymore, they will go the way of Libya and of Iraq and then the rest of the Arab countries that are being destroyed right now.
Back to the lines we go. We got Abu Bakr online. Assalamu alaikum, Bakr.
Wa alaikum salam. Yeah, I've got another question for Daryl. Daryl, for those Muslims who are very passionate about the plight of the Palestinians and who invest in the stock market, could you please enlighten us to what extent the Jews own multinational corporations, in stock markets, and how they control the stock market? Just to enlighten to facilitate that.
Well, okay. I'll give you a couple of examples of companies that are owned by Jews. Nestle's, Danone, Coca-Cola, General Electric, Renault. We can go down the list. Now, does that mean Israelis own them? Well, the Israelis have a lot of investment in them, but Zionist Jews are the principal holders of preferred stock in these industries. ExxonMobil, Shell Oil. You can go down the list. So the simple truth of the matter is there's nary a single large enterprise of corporate structure that they are not in control of. And if there is a company that they are not in control of, it is being identified for destruction. So that ultimately when the dust settles, the only companies left in the world of note will be theirs. But as I said before, Israel is just their home base for crime. It is not the home of the Jews, as many people believe, but rather a place where they can act internationally with impunity. Most of the criminal Zionists that operate in this world do operate out of America, in New York City or Chicago, or out of London, or out of Paris, Mr. Sarkozy himself, or Mr. Henry Bernard Levy, who helped put together the invasion of Libya. Or, my point I'm trying to make here is, corporate structure in general was designed by these criminals. And, human beings have been corporatized. This is what I was talking about earlier with birth certificates. There's a great deal of knowledge that needs to be had by the listening public in regards to who owns you. technically, if you've got a birth certificate, they own you. You are owned. Your parents, when they signed that certificate at your live birth, turned over control of you to them. And that is a fact of life. Now, whether or not you can wrap your head around being owned by somebody else is something that you have to deal with. But the truth of the matter is it's exactly the facts, and that's what the facts show. We are in a situation right now where if we don't come up with a solution in very quick order, very short order, we are going to find ourselves permanently and totally enslaved or dead. There we are.
Daryl, yes, just to move on, Abu Khalid writes on Facebook and he says, is the current Russian protest against Putin part of keeping the Russian government occupied and thus expanding the definition of the Arab Spring?
Well, you know, what happens in Russia, I mean, if the Russians didn't want, or Putin didn't want those protests to go forward, they wouldn't. Whatever goes on you think you've got honest government in Russia, and then you take a look at the theft in Jewish hands of all of these oligarchs. They were Abramowitz and Berezovsky. Most of them are living in Israel or in London. But who ended up taking control after they left Russia with all the billions was other Jews. So the country is still in the hands of the same crooks. Now, that doesn't mean factions within Zionism are not having issues with each other. You know, there's a tendency among crime gangs not to get along. You know, you're already dealing with immoral, amoral psychopaths, and amoral psychopaths don't always go along with the rules. So they may be fighting amongst themselves in some areas, but the fact is, on the larger issues, they follow the Rothschild / Mendel House / Albert Pike three-war theory, or the protocols of the learned elders of Zion theories that have been followed to the letter. If you take a look at these documents and you read them, our histories have been a mirror image of these documents. And that is more than just a mistake or a coincidence. It is by design.
Mm-hmm. Interesting, Daryl. This one says, please comment on the climate conference in South Africa, and it comes from Zach.
Well, yeah. Yes. That was a big fraud. You know, there is no global warming in NIAID. The world has been getting colder over the last 5 years. This carbon dioxide is beneficial to plants. It's a fraud, and they have been caught red-handed changing data to show that the world is getting warmer when in fact it's getting colder. It's all about a carbon tax, which is part of a global tax. It will be the first tax instituted to every country globally. And they need to do that to set up their financial structure. Once they've got a single tax globally enforced to every nation, they can move on to other things to control every nation. The first thing they're trying to do is with this fraud called global warming and carbon tax.
Yeah. Daryl, just to move on, and we've got about 5 or 6 minutes, and I know, Daryl, you've made many predictions in the past, and just looking ahead, considering what has taken place 2011, the Arab world, we see what is taking place in Pakistan as well, and recently, all those, in fact, Pakistani army personnel that were also killed as well, so there seems to be a lot that is taking place in Pakistan. And just to get some sort of view, looking at the global scenario at this point in time in the various regions, what do you anticipate? What is likely to happen, considering that America is heading towards elections again, so Barack Obama, and just to give us some sort of an idea as to what your thoughts are, Daryl.
Well, we'll continue to see more of the financial crises deepening in some areas. We'll see, of course, the euro come under a permanent threat, possibly dissolution in the next year. We'll see the dollar come under threat as well, because ultimately the United States is slated for failure as well. And we'll see more draconian police activities against the American public. We will see a failure of many businesses over this next year. We'll see a lot of banking failures. We'll see depression setting in the third world in ways we haven't seen in our lifetimes or possibly even our parents' lifetimes. Never in human history have there been more than 7 billion people on the planet. And many of these countries in the third world, both in South America and Africa, rely on imports of food, and those imports are becoming unbearably expensive to these countries. So you're going to see Ethiopian-style famines and Somalian-style famines erupting across the third world. You're going to see anger and violence in the streets at levels not seen in our lifetimes and possibly even many lifetimes before that. And we will begin to see more clearly that they want things to fail before they reconstruct things. And I'm going to read a quote from this guy, Mendel House, Philip Drew administrator, he wrote. He wrote in his book in 1871, "We shall unleash the nihilists and the atheists, and we shall provoke a formidable social cataclysm, which in all its horror will show clearly to the nations the effect of absolute atheism, origin of savagery, and of most bloody turmoil. Then everywhere the citizens, obliged to defend themselves against the world minority of revolutionaries, will exterminate those destroyers of civilization. And the multitudes disillusioned with Christianity and those deistic spirit will from that moment be without compass, without direction, anxious for a new ideal, but without knowing where to render its adoration, will receive the pure light through the universal manifestation of pure doctrine of Lucifer, the light bearer, brought finally out in the public. A manifestation will result from the general reactionary movement which will follow the destruction of Christianity and atheism, both conquered and exterminated at the same time." Albert Pike, on his world conquest of 3 world wars. I told you about this man. He was a Satanist and a Freemason and a designer of this Jewish criminal cabal back in 1871. And he told the world about the fight against Islam and about the destruction of the Islamic Revolution and Christianity and about the destruction of the human populations and their ultimate enslavement. And these things that he wrote were not errors. They were a blueprint for this crime wave that we're feeling right now.
Daryl, I've just got a final comment that has come through where the listener wants to know, is the withdrawal of American troops from Iraq a re-invitation and a preparation for an attack on Iran?
They've never really left Iraq. There's still 30,000 troops sitting over there. They've still got their air fleets ready to pounce. They've moved things to Diego Garcia and to other places like Bahrain and to Kuwait. But they've never really left. And basically what they're leaving behind is a decimated population, sick from depleted uranium, rife with starvation and pestilence, and basically unable to stand on their own 2 feet to fight back against what the Americans have horrifically done to them. And no, they've never left. They've repositioned some of their people. They've retrooped in other places, but they're absolutely still in evidence there in the most powerful of ways. And if there isn't an attack on Iran, many people in the Iranian leadership are complicit in it. And if you take a look at the relationship between Israel, the United States, and Iran over the last 40 years, you'll understand exactly what I'm talking about. And Rafsanjani should be examined by your readers and listeners and find out what his connections to the West are, because your eyes will bug out of your head. And keep an eye on the Muslim Brotherhood's leadership and their acquiescence to the military dictatorship in Egypt.
Yes, General, I've just got a final caller here. We go to Mayfair. Ibrahim, assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum, Brother Nayat, and hello to Daryl there.
Hello, Ibrahim. How are you?
I've watched over the years how they've dialed the whole American society away from the Gettysburg Address and Abraham Lincoln's speech, that government of the people, for the people, by the people,
And that is why they don't want even these Arab nations to go to the full extent of democracy, because if you go with a Gettysburg Address, you slip entirely out of the Jewish domination which they want in the world, because that doesn't accommodate them. Now, the 99% must wake up to that fact, because if you go back to Gettysburg Address, you go back to the ideals and what Abraham Lincoln was saying there, then these Zionists cannot dominate America and the world as they do.
Well, Lincoln was murdered. Lincoln was murdered by a Rothschild agent. John Wilkes Booth was an agent of Rothschild.
Yes, and no sooner was all this said by him that when they documented it, you find there were discrepancies in the documentation of that very speech. So what we have to hang on to and look to is that they must deliver government of the people, by the people, for the people. If we're talking democracy, that's what it's all about. Now, the 99% have got to dial themselves back through there, either with Ron Paul, and I hope Ron Paul does make it, because it looks like he's the only one talking some measure of sense there.
Ron Paul will be assassinated if he does anything against this cabal.
Well, that's the future. What can we do? But really...
What we can do, Ibrahim, listen to me for a moment. What we can do is to take the things that I've seeded your mind with and find out if they're true. And when you discover that I have been accurate on all of the things I've described to you tonight, share it with other people so that the wealth and depth of our knowledge becomes so powerful that they cannot pull these games anymore. The truth is there's only a few million of these criminals in the world being operative, and we've got billions of us. We need to wake up on large scale and understand the depths and sophistication of their crimes so that we can thwart their crimes and stop them in their tracks, and then make sure that we criminalize these people and get them out of our lives.
You're right, Daryl. You're absolutely right. The only thing is we've got Channel Islam. We've got to look for more venues where you can really speak openly like this. On our own South African radio stations, even there you find people trying to block you getting the truth out, so that the main populace in South Africa really hasn't got a clue sometimes what they are being done to them. We can only hope for Channel Islam, and even at best, it takes some time to get ideas across, even here.
Yeah, I agree.
Walaikum salam. Yes, shukran for the call. Final comment, Daryl. This one says, Prince Philip says if he was to be reincarnated, he would like to be a deadly virus. Please comment.
Yes, I told you there's a eugenics program that is quite advanced, in fact, and you can see it through Fabian Society. You can see it through what they talk about with this man Albert Pike talks about reduction of population. So does Edward Mendel House talk about it. So did the Europeans want they cannot pay the pensions they've promised to their population. So the way they're going to get rid of them is either through a man-made, manufactured virus that everybody dies from, or they'll do it through war, or they'll do it through internment camps that they set up. We don't know exactly what means they'll use, but certainly part of the formula is to get rid of many, many human beings in this world. And South Africa and the African continent, in their view, is way overpopulated and is slated for starvation and for pestilence. And if your listeners don't understand that, they should wake up and start doing some research on their own and find out just how desperate this time is.
Well, certainly, Daryl, unfortunately our time is up, and we'd like to engage more with you, but I'm sure this is not the last. Always always a pleasure talking to you, Daryl, bringing always, a different dimension and a fresh insight into the issues that we faced with around the globe. From all of us, we certainly do appreciate your time, Daryl.
Thank you, Anayat. It was great to have this opportunity to speak to your listeners.
And all the best to you. Have a nice Christmas as well, Daryl, and you be safe and be blessed.
Thank you, my friend. Bye-bye now.